Superman and Lois. This episode for me, I know last week I'd said like the previous one was a struggle bus. This was also a struggle bus with the interesting and big final ending. But it was okay. I'm interested to see what we do in the penultimate episode and in the finale.
Last week's episode, actually looking back on it, was quite fun. I know there were issues, but I did rewatch our conversation about it and we had a good time. I think the difference with this week's episode is it was a very dark, intense kind of episode. And I get that the idea of it was complications because that's the title of it. But like, we're used to these kinds of arcs for characters, and I don't think there was a particular problem with any single one of them. But getting them all together, it just felt like almost maybe too much. Intense is probably the word I'd use to describe it the most because every arc upped the intensity. Some got there naturally, some got there out of nowhere. And we will get into all of that. But some of it was excellent, but I just feel like maybe they did too much by having too many of the characters go through similar things at the same time. That's kind of a networky trope. This show tends to steer away from networky tropes since it's got more of a streaming quality to it. Kind of disappointed they felt the need to cram everybody's trauma into the one episode. But yeah, that's where I'm going to start.
I think for me, it's the framework of how the episode is. So like the big initial emotional drive is that it's the day of Lois's mastectomy. And that is very hard to stick the front part of the episode on as the emotional weight. It was emotional, but I also felt like a lot wasn't really going on because we were waiting and prepping and trying to get the boys settled and trying to get her settled. And there was stuff going on with Matteo and Bruno and his mom, Pia, where everything seemed to be fine with them. And I was like, where are we going with this? Because I felt like we were going to move through that a little bit faster. I thought we were going to go ahead and, Lois be in surgery and at least within 15 minutes of the episode. And that did not happen. I think she goes in, 30 to 40 minutes into the episode. So we're really there for a really long time examining their feelings on it. Not to say that there weren't good conversations. There was. I think my favorite scene of the episode is actually the scene between John and Jordan. When Jordan has a panic attack. And I was like, oh, we're back here. I mean, I think that is a natural reaction to have, but we also know that Jordan has a mood disorder. And that was a triggering situation. And I loved that, it was his brother that calmed him down. And you could see the bond between the two of them. And you could see that, like, unfortunately for Jordan, it seems that every time he's going to have a new power, it has to come from trauma. And that just might be how his brain works. Like that's how his brain fires. Like, well, I'm upset, so let's just introduce a new power to me right in this moment. And I appreciated, that it was X-ray vision because it worked into the plot. But sometimes I really love these brothers. Like I really do. And that was a great emotional scene and I love that Clark got to witness his boys having a moment together and John stepping up to take care of his brother.
That was an incredible scene. I remember when I watched it, I was like, yes, we've been missing so much of this. And I didn't even realize the show had been missing it until we saw it. I agree. I'm pretty sure there was at the opening scene of the series, I think said that Jordan was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder. And that's why he very much felt isolated in the first season. But I feel like we maybe didn't see enough or hear enough of the family talking about that after season one, because I'm pretty sure when Jordan got taken over by Zeta Rowe, Tal Rowe's father, he played on his fears, he played on his anxieties to suppress Jordan so that he could use the body. And I feel like after Lois helped him get over that, we haven't really seen any of that since. And disorders like that don't just go away overnight. And we know that Jordan's a little socially awkward and everything, but he genuinely feels things, and I don't think we've seen enough of that. So to see it now in such an important moment, it was such a powerful scene, and getting to see the two brothers share that as well, it's that moment as well. I said last week, Jonathan is such a good brother, and I'm not sure we see that enough. I miss seeing the two of them have their own, or their storylines together. Jordan's always off worried about Sarah or superheroine. Jonathan had the whole Candace debacle this season with her father and the truck getting stolen and all of that. And I just wish we got to see more of them together. And I think the pacing is going to come into play here because this season, is starting to feel like it's running out of time. And that's why I feel like it could have used the 2 extra episodes, because the pacing in those first 6, 7, 8, 9 episodes were wonderful. And it's only in the last two we're starting to ask questions about that. And Superman at Lois is one of those shows that's always had time to press pause on the characters, show us the character moments, show us how they're feeling. And yet this season felt the need to give us a single episode just to press pause so it can pick back up and move the story on next week. It felt like this episode had a lot of overworking to do, and as a result, it was kind of too much, in my opinion. But the Jonathan and Jordan scene was probably my favorite scene in the whole episode.
Mhm. It was fantastic. I know I told you guys this when we were watching the episode, but I think my favorite parts of the episode actually have to do with the exploration of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
It came out of nowhere, but like I think it was rather important storytelling because even, what would we say, the Sarah plot was maybe a C plot, like with her parents, but like the fact that Lana noticed that her daughter was like she was spiraling in a way that could trigger a bigger spiral, and she immediately hopped to as a mom. She's like, I don't really know what's going on with you over here, Kyle, but we need to be parents right now. And Sarah is emotionally in trouble. And I want to make sure that she has her tools and the resources she needs. And some of those resources are us. So let's go have a conversation with her daughter. I thought that was fantastic storytelling for Lana as a mom and Kyle as a parent, especially in the diner scene when he is opening up the best that he can, because Kyle isn't really a sharer. And he did hold back a little bit. He didn't tell his daughter what exactly it was that he had done as a teenager that was rock bottom for him. I don't know if that's something that we're going to learn down the road, or if it's just something that's a part of his character that we'll just never know, because it's clearly something he'd been carrying. But I enjoyed that he was like, I'm not saying that you're going to become an alcoholic or that this is hereditary for you. What I'm saying is I lost my mom at a young age, and my crutch was alcohol, and it changed who I was as a person. And I want you not to go reach for reckless things because you were sad. I want you to find structure. And that's why you're going to be a waitress. Like like to have a job. I thought them being like, it doesn't even have to, if you don't want to go to therapy, you don't have to go to therapy, but you do have to have structure, and we are going to check in on you. And I thought that was beautiful and lovely. I thought it was a lot considering we didn't see Sarah spiraling to the point of being scared of what she might do to herself. But since they decided to do that storyline, how they handled it, I thought was really, really good.
Mm-hmm. In the episode, it was brilliant, but I do agree. I feel like we've kind of struggled with the way they've been portraying Sarah over the last couple, basically since the start of the season. The story structures have been a bit all over the place with Sarah, which is why I'm glad we finally had a moment to press pause and have her have these feelings. I just hope that it isn't the old trope that we just dealt with it in this episode and now we're going to move on and she'll be back to normal. I feel like they had some wonderful conversations there, but I feel like it needs to be an ongoing conversation, if you know what I mean. And that's not just the only plot in this episode I felt like that with. It just feels like everyone had to press pause in this moment to deal with their trauma so that they can pick back up and move on. And that's not what the show does. The show usually takes the trauma with them and lets them explore them and then ultimately get over them on a natural journey like you would in real life. Whereas I you know what I mean? I just feel like this was a very television kind of thing to do. And the show just doesn't do that.
It was a very trauma-based episode in a surprising way. It was sort of like, okay, we have this episode, and then we have two more. People need to make decisions. And we need to get out of this some of these storylines, and we need to do it fast. We're just going to fast track everything, which was unfortunate. I thought the Pia storyline happened really fast. Like I figured she was going to deteriorate fast, but the she went from being okay to then not being able to control her powers at all, and that threw me. And I guess if we had another episode, we would have seen her starting to deteriorate more rather than it's like she coughed and now we're over. Like now we can't control her. Now we can't control her powers, and we're shaking the entirety of like Metropolis because I guess I didn't quite understand. I feel like her powers shifted in that moment. Like suddenly she's shaking. Not only is she just vibrating so hard through her vocal box that she's now shaking everything else. That threw me.
I was confused. I didn't realize she had died until Clark carried her to that rooftop or wherever he was.
She died weird too. That was it didn't seem like it matched her powers.
It's I kind of struggle with the way they did that in that episode as well. Because why at the start was she just randomly making people hear things for no reason? Was she just testing out her powers again, seeing how they're growing? Because Clark was flying all over Metropolis trying to fix things, or was she losing control at that point as well? Because it only implied that she started losing control when she coughed. She was happy before that. And then she said to Bruno, "Oh, we've done the wrong thing. We've done it all wrong. We should never have done this." I'm like, but you were literally like making people's lives hell 5 minutes ago, making those sounds all over Metropolis for no reason. I don't know why she was doing that. But yeah, I feel like back to your points that she just could not control whatever was going on inside of her anymore. Her powers seemed to have some kind of like vibrational frequency, and it was kind of controlling her more than she was controlling it. Um, and I think the reason that she was in so much pain was that the only way to let go was to literally let it out. So whether that was via the canary cry, or apparently she can do it through her hands as well. She splattered that poor man onto the train. That was like violent for Superman OS. Um, uh, but yeah, so I think back to Reed's point, I think the reason that she died was because she literally let it out in the sky, and then whatever was inside of her basically imploded. And that was like her final cry, so to speak. Because if she'd done that in the city, she would have taken out the whole block. That's I think Sam said that, didn't I? Um, but yeah, that felt very like season finale, like the whole like
Mhm.
when we saw Bruno, this big bad villain who's taken over the city, he was ready to pack up and move on with his family so that they could live a long, happy, and healthy life together. I was like, okay, we're very quickly wrapping this up here. This is quickly getting finale esque. But I guess the reason why now is because I feel like we're probably done with the Mannheims now. That's maybe the end of their story. We've done it again where we pivoted from the type of villain midway through the season. This is the third time in a row. So I feel like this has set up the stage for Lax. But I do think as far as like an exit for Pia goes, well, that was incredible. I feel like the escalation of the arc was a problem because we didn't have an awful lot of time. But I feel like that might have been one of the strongest aspects of the episode because, yeah, she's a bad person. So is Bruno, but you couldn't help but root for her to succeed, to live, to beat this, just so that she could be a mom and she could continue to be a wife and they could be happy together. I said that last week when we had that final moment of her reuniting with Bruno and Mateo. But this week there was just no turning back for her. And the moment she realised that they'd gone too far, it was really heartbreaking. And I know you mentioned this, Sabrina, so I'll move on to that. The fact that Clark had to tell her it's okay to let go, which is what he learned in therapy. Wow, that was an excellent way of bringing the story together. I really appreciated the strength of writing in that moment.
I didn't expect it to come back, and it
No,
came back in such a beautiful way. And it's like the blending of who Clark is as a person and as a superhero to have such a big heart, to know that like she is basically tearing apart this town, this city, but it's she's not doing it on purpose anymore, and like she's suffering, and just being able to connect with her on an emotional level to understand. Besides the fact that she's trying to hold it in because she doesn't want to decimate Metropolis, that wasn't what she was trying to do. To be able to give her like the ability to like it's okay, like it's you can let go. I will make sure that you get back to your family even though you have to pass. And he did do that, and we of course we would expect Clark to do that, but it was just such a when they were flying up in the air, I was like, oh, it's so sad. I wonder how we're going to do, like how this is going to happen. And then when the explosion went off and he's bringing them back, I was like, I can't imagine what it would be like. And obviously it wouldn't happen because again, superpowers, but what it would be like to be the family member waiting on the rooftop, knowing that what's about to happen is that your loved one is going to pass and you cannot be there because of what's going on with the circumstances. That was heart-wrenching. I do think though, I wish Natalie was not there. Like I just felt like she was like what's the word I'm looking for? Comforting Mateo. But I was like, I don't know. That was a very strong emotional beat. I feel like y'all's relationship is not strong enough for you to be like pat, pat, and him to just smile at you like his mama just passed. Feel like we should, I don't know. I just felt like we could have written something stronger for those two if she was going to comfort him, because I would be a mess on the rooftop. Like, and he seemed generally okay. Like he just did, even though that was a very emotional sequence.
yeah, it was very almost like that. I think that's why Bruno ran over to him and gave him a hug when John Henry said he doesn't know if Superman can do anything. Um, so that they could maybe reach a stage of acceptance. I know, again, maybe it happened very, very quickly. Um, but yeah, since this is the end of like the Bruno storyline, is it the end of Matteo now? We know John Henry's going to look out for him. And I did appreciate that one of the longest running arcs of the season has been this kind of feud between John Henry and Bruno Mannheim, even though it's because of what happened with the original John Henry of that Earth. Um, but the fact that in the end, Bruno said, I know what kind of man you are because he trusted him to look after Matteo and that he'd keep his word. I thought that was kind of a full circle moment because I'm pretty sure in one of the earlier episodes where John Henry was threatening Bruno, Bruno said something like, I know what kind of man you are, in like a very mean kind of a way, implying he's not a good man. Whereas this time he was obviously implying that he knows he is a good man in his heart. So the fact that Bruno was willing to trust his word and to look after his son, I think that said a lot, and it was a good way to write him off because there was good in Bruno. He had good intentions. He just got corrupted by the power and everything he'd done over the years. So I do think that was a worthy way to write him off. I just want to say before we move on, this is a very one-dimensional character in the comics who's just the head of Intergang and nothing more. Intergang barely factored into the story. This was a man who was trying to save his wife and keep his family together, and I thought that was an excellent portrayal of the character. Now that we know Lex is coming in, is that the end for Matteo? Is at the end for Natalie at Mattel, because again, that relationship escalated incredibly quickly. She didn't want to let him go, and then she was ready to let him go, and then she was back in his life there at the end. But yeah, I guess they just needed comfort because that was my favorite scene of the episode. It was an incredibly powerful scene when Superman showed up with Pia in his arms, and they just kind of had to watch, and then the song played and the emotional montage. Everybody was going through it in this episode.
For sure. I guess if we shave off the first part, well, no, because I like the mental health the parts too. I don't know. It's a mixed bag for this episode. Before we move to Nancy, though, I did want to do a temperature check because we're nearing the end of Superman and Lois's third season. How are we feeling about it?
Oh, this one's for me, isn't it?
We have to include you.
So if I'm being honest, I feel like I don't remember what I've said and what has happened in the past few weeks. But watching this episode, I realized like, oh, like we have 2 episodes left. There's no more like waiting to see the big picture. So I was kind of like zooming out, realizing that I've seen the material thus far. Like this is 80% of the season, 87% of the season. It's not my favorite if I zoom out and like look at the experience of watching it. But that doesn't negate any moments that I have enjoyed in the season. Like obviously those still exist. There's things that I really love about the season, but I think just for me, this hasn't been my favorite season or my favorite viewing experience. I think maybe, and I don't think this is completely a show problem. It's like my problem. This is a me problem. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like shading the show or saying that it's bad or anything. That's not what I'm saying. But I think for me, if I had binged it, I think perhaps I would have enjoyed it more.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just feels, I don't know. For my own viewing experience, I think once I finish an episode, it's out of sight, out of mind, and I completely forget about the show. And then I watch a new episode, and I'm like, I feel like it's been a month, but it's only been like a week. I don't know. I just remember really having a lot of fun with season 2 and having fun watching it. And the season has been different.
I can see that. I think season 3 was really high up there for me. And then, as I told y'all, we hit this episode, and I will factor in the previous episode too. I was like, let me take a step back and look at the whole season, because what is it that I'm actually enjoying? And so for me personally, I'm loving the Lois. And I really think the Lois storyline is a strong plot. I don't think the superhero aspect of the show this season matched the family drama one. I think the family drama was better writing, and the superhero one, because it was intertwined with Lois's story, had to take a back seat. And we had some really fantastic action sequences, but in all honesty, even though, like as Michael, as you pointed out, Bruno is fleshed out as a villain in the storyline, he wasn't really giving the type of villain we're used to. Like, we're not doing maniacal, we're not taking over a town, where he literally was just a man making poor decisions in order to save his wife. And so the escalation there, like the risks of it, the stakes, just wasn't what we've been used to for the past 2 seasons. So like when I sit with that aspect of it, I'm like, I guess season three as a whole would be at the bottom for me. It wouldn't be like number one or number two anymore.
Yeah, I respect that. I feel like the season really hit the ground running with like its first 6, 7, 8 episodes. But as we've headed towards the end of it, it does feel like it's running out of time. I feel like the season was paced as a Superman and Lois season would be. And now suddenly it's got 2 less episodes and it's going to have to fasten that up a little bit. And I agree, the super story is not matched up to it. And I think partially because it wasn't as fleshed out. We've went episodes without seeing Clark in the suit, or maybe he'd show up for one final battle at the end, and that wouldn't even be directly related to it. So I agree. I feel like I like that this show can do personal stakes instead of end of world stakes. We've had end of world stakes for the first 2 seasons. Let it do something different. I just hope it gets the chance now to move on to season 4 and go back to what we know it likes to do, and does it very, very well. It's been a very traumatic season. It's been a very, very heavy season. And
Heavy, that's a good word.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like it's been handled well, but altogether it can get overwhelming. And I understand why a lot of people would say the season wasn't for them. I haven't decided where I'm putting it in my ranking, but I think it hit the grounds running so strongly that it would have matched season 1's quality. But as the episodes have gone on, it's slightly.
I love how I'm like, I've seen enough. I'm ready to state my opinion. And Michael's like, wait, we got 2 more hours.
The show always goes that strong. What do you want me to say? But yeah, no, honestly, things are good. I just think this show obviously is used to being somewhat better, but that doesn't mean I have any issues with how it's handled the storylines. I just feel like maybe so many of them together can be traumatic for people. And so yeah, I'll wait to do my ranking. I'll probably be rewriting a ranking, you know me. I'll wait until afterwards just to see where I put it. But I understand where you guys are coming from, and I agree that it's not the strongest season the longer it goes on.
I mean, look, I'm still watching it. I wouldn't be still watching if I didn't like it. You know, like if I'm gonna watch a season of a show that I don't fully enjoy, it's gonna be a season of a show that I don't enjoy, of a show that I enjoy. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I follow the thread. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'd rather watch a mediocre, I don't want to call it mediocre, but like, you know what I'm getting at? Like, yeah, like if there's a show that I love, if they're not hitting for this in a certain few episodes in a season for me, I'd rather still watch it than, like, you know what I mean? If there's a show that I don't love and then I just lose interest, I have no problem dropping it. But like, I'm not gonna, like, Bitsy's too good for me to leave. Like, you know what I mean?
I think for me, the heart of the season is really in Lois's storyline and Clark and Lois's connection. And everything else is like, we're doing things. Like, things are happening in Smallville. They're connecting, kind of. Don't worry about that. We over here with Clark and Lois. I'm like, but I have to worry about it, though, because you don't know what you're doing with the teens. I have no idea what's going on with Lana as the mayor. She's just doing her mayor thing. We picked up and dropped the John Henry and Lana thing, and we picked it up again. We didn't even talk about Kyle and Chrissy. Not much to talk about. They're annoying me now. And I don't know. I feel like everybody else's plots, unless the boys are involved in the plot with their parents, is just suffering a bit, because the real meat of the season is Lois's cancer story, and they clearly care a lot about that storyline, and everything else was like, get to it when we get to it. That's what it's feeling like.
Yeah, this season storylines have been handled fine, but I feel like it's dropped the ball with some of the overall show storylines. Like Kyle found out Clark was Superman, and then
what happened with that?
He found out Clark was Superman. He was like, "Great, can't," and that was it. It's not no fallout. The only reason he wasn't happy was so he could take it out on Chrissy. So we have had a 3-season long story here, building hype around it with Jonathan and Jordan over the last few episodes. Kyle finds out so he can fall out with Chrissy for the X amount of time, so that whatever's going on with Sarah can make him realize that he was probably acting out, so that he can go and apologize to Chrissy for the X time. And I'm like, you wasted a 3 season long arc here on that. He doesn't even care that Clark was Superman, the little nerd from his class that it sounds like he might have had fun bullying when he was younger. Yeah. So,
But we need to, I feel like we need to circle back on how aggressive Kyle was to Jonathan. We need that to be examined because that was a lot.
It was. He really stepped forward, and I was like, what part of this interaction feels like it's appropriate?
He is a teen boy, sir. What is going on? That was a lot. And my red flags are popping off for Kyle.
he was being a hero. What's wrong with that?
Hey, Clark, we need to address that.
And he regressed to season 1, Kyle. Like, it was very much giving season 1.
It was scary to me.
Yeah. And like, Clark had to, his father should not have to put his body literally in front of you so you don't try to go pull his son out the house. Like, what are we
and like
doing?
Even if Jonathan had superpowers, Kyle, what were you planning to do to him?
Yeah. Good point.
Okay, macho man. I don't know what you were going to do to the boy with powers. Oh my God, that whole thing.
That's why the way the handling of the arc really bothered me, because Kyle is a macho man. He was someone who would have been at the top of his class in school and loved being the big like celebrity student, the class clown who everyone loved or whatever. But as the years have gone on, he's got worn down by Smallville. He doesn't like people like Clark who left and took their talents elsewhere while he stayed in town. So the fact is that he would realize that his classmate actually was, I don't want to say it's more successful, sounds mean, I don't mean that, but he like Superman of all things. I feel like the Kyle we know would have had an issue with that, and they just dropped it so they could take it out on Chrissy. And yeah, I feel like they mishandled that storyline really, really poorly. And then meanwhile, you've got Kyle coming through with the wisdom to Sarah. I'm like, okay, that's the Kyle that we've seen, the progression we understand.
Yeah, pick one.
Yeah, exactly. Are we season 1 Kyle or season 3 Kyle? I just don't know.
Do you guys remember at the beginning of the season when I messaged you and I was like, did Kyle always have a job? Like, that's how much the character means to me, is that I didn't even know he's been employed for 3 seasons.
Well, I think, okay, so when they were very aggressive when we first met Kyle, when it came to how much he was the archetype of the small town man whose life didn't go the way he thought it would, and jobs and resources are leaving the town, and he's very angry about it. And then we started like moving away from it, and I was like, okay, but if we moved away, we have to move away entirely, because season 1 Kyle was a lot. Season 1 Kyle was an alcoholic who was on the couch, couldn't make it to his daughter's events, clearly was giving, like, there were traumatic situations around that. Like, it just was not a good time in the Cushing household. And now it seems like we are in a better place. So whenever he reminds us of that, I'm like, Kyle, please don't tell us, try to joke with Clark about the times in which you bullied him. Mm-hmm. Not a good time. Not funny to me. Please move on.
Clark could flick you to the moon.
Which he was like, you could have done something to him. He's like, yeah, he could have, Kyle. But why are we going back to when he was 14 and you pantsed him? Why? Mm-hmm. Why are we back there?
You know what? I want Clark's revenge. I love how, though, that we almost made it out of this review with Kyle going out unscathed, and like,
yeah. He's getting us
back.
Pull up a chair, Kyle.
Hopefully they do. He has more balanced characterization, though, if they do get a season 4, because it is sort of like out of like left field when they remind us that he's a jerk. Like, because he's been fine.
There's some weeks where I'm like, okay, I like this character, and then the next week they return to a different. It's like sometimes it can be sitcom-y, how like one week the character is like really flighty and kind of a ditz, and then the next week whatever the narrative wants from them, they're like, they can be the voice of reason in the group or something. And I'm like, it's too hard to hold on to certain characters because they change in different episodes depending on what's going on around them.
Mm-hmm.
It is. And especially for him. He's whatever the plot needs him to be.
And Chrissy as well, yeah.
I know. Chrissy's personality changed entirely this season. She was a go-getter in season 2, and now we just making poor decisions and feeling miserable most of the time. Mm-hmm. And that's just talking about flying.
Headlights.
And again, everybody else's storyline suffering in season 3, but Clark and Lois, immaculate, thriving with the storylines.